According to the Australian Clerical Officers Association, the problem CES staff throughout Australia face is this. The numerous state and federal government programs designed to help the unemployed have kept them overemployed. Quite aside from those programs, Newcastle's 33 staff, for example, have to help 8,000 people on their books and deal with employer inquiries. The ACOA wants 22 extra staff in the Hunter and 600 extra Australia-wide. The department has offered 200 more, less than one extra staff member per branch. In most offices, industrial action has consisted of bans on collecting statistics and monitoring programs. Newcastle is going it alone with today's work-in until midnight.
Why have you chosen this form of industrial action?
Well, there's not a lot of industrial action that's open to us. We can go on strike, but the staff are very reluctant to do anything that will inconvenience the public. Also, too, the work's still there and piled up high for when we come back. And we lose pay, and of course we don't want to do that either. And so we thought that perhaps if we had a work-in, we could clear some of the backlog and be open to the public. They could still use us, still get served by us, and, you know, get them understanding what our problem is.
If you don't get any satisfaction from the department, what will be your next step?
I really don't know where we'll go from here. I'm hoping that this will be enough perhaps to prompt the government to reconsider.
Meanwhile, the Department of Social Security is about to have its own staffing problems. The department wants to cut 572 staff positions throughout New South Wales. Most of those staff are people hired to administer the ill-fated assets test. Nevertheless, 190 positions will come directly from Social Security because the department says the volume of work they must handle has fallen.
Staff say this is unlikely since the CES is dealing with more people, many of whom are referred to Social Security. Stop work meetings were held throughout the state today to consider adopting bans and limitations in protest. At Newcastle, ACOA members voted unanimously to adopt the bans, and by Monday the overall result of the statewide vote will be known. Meanwhile, clerical assistants at Newcastle belonging to the Australian Public Service Association also met and decided on their own bans. They will not man Social Security counters before 9 a.m. or after 4 and will not issue health cards.
So they came to Wembley. Everton, without a single goal being scored against them, Sheffield Wednesday winning through without playing a single match on their home ground.
Beat Sheffield Wednesday that year 3-2 in the final. Like the Wilco, now coaches Lake McCoy. The 66 Cup final to equalise Everton's victory with 2 goals. This year's Cup final is one of the most open finals for years. Everton hoping a win will take them out of the shadow of
Everton rampaging for the equaliser and Young puts it
for their
through.
first cup. Everton will be hoping for big games from attackers John Heath and Scottish international Andy Gray.
Sheffield's
while
first half
Watford
performance
will be
was
relying on
magnificent.
Morris Johnson,
That opening
George
goal was a
Riley,
credit.
and exciting attacker John Barnes. Don't forget NBN will bring you this year's FA Cup final live with the coverage starting on Saturday night at 11:40 p.m.
But Sheffield's eagerness was sometimes too eager.
So far of the championship, P3 got underway on time, with the Catamarans racing away in light to stiff breeze. The eventual line on it went to Cromer High's John Forbes in Razorfield in Division 1 for Cats. Division 2 for large monopoles, the Adam 10 named Formula 10 of Craig Phillips and Swansea repeated his efforts in P2 and led to the line. Locals must now be favourites to take out the Division 2 title. But the locals weren't so well performed in Division 3, small monopoles, with Andrew Wilson's Narwee High taking the line honours in Murphy's Law. A good win considering the competitive conditions. making their way through the course saw the skilled youngsters manoeuvring the best of their craft. Matthias Lucas of Stanfield made it home first to take his claim for the secondary school title. The fourth and final heat is sailed tomorrow in all 4 divisions to decide the overall winners. Given a decent win, it's guaranteed the class of sailing will be that of a future national champion.
Remains of the Toyota Corolla involved in this morning's accident. The 52-year-old woman from Lemon Tree Passage was driving behind a line of traffic on Main Road, Anna Bay, when she braked because of slowing vehicles in front. As a result of the wet, slippery surface, the car skidded onto the wrong side of the road and into the path of this tabletop truck. The name of the woman is expected to be released later tonight. Meanwhile, police across the state are intensifying random breathtaking and crashing down on speed. Spokesperson Newcastle believes that the accident investigation squad is looking into these offences, hopefully some recommendations so future accidents can be avoided. Observers say the government is taking a step in the right direction by spending $50,000 on a campaign to educate drivers about the hazards of heavy vehicles. In fact, it's overdue. But they also say that all levels of government should make a determined effort to improve our roads and so prevent the kind of carnage we've seen this week.
The Minister for Public Works, Mr Laurie Brereton, announced today that the New South Wales Government had entered into formal negotiations with Mr Kurt Picardi for the restoration of 3 buildings. They are the former Public Works Department building on the corner of Watt and Hunter Streets, designed in 1872, and adjoining buildings, including the former police station, built in 1861. Mr Brereton believes they are the most important group of 19th century buildings in Newcastle. The Public Works Department invited tenders from developers interested in leasing the buildings on the basis that they can serve them without cost to the government. Mr Picardi was the only developer to submit a plan. He intends to sublease a substantial portion of the old police station to the Newcastle Heritage Centre, which would restore the interior of the building. Negotiations with Mr Picardi are expected to be completed in time for restoration work to commence by the end of the year. It was the second meeting called in Singleton to discuss what the community sees as a growing drug problem in the region. There was criticism that at the last meeting the whole subject was left up in the air.
Double its
This
present
time,
capacity,
specialist
then
advice
we
was
plan to
received
double it
from
again,
Reverend Rod
and eventually the
Sumner,
farm will
a
cater
leading
for
figure in the
somewhere
training of
around about
ministers of all
100 young
denominations
people.
in helping young people
The
with drug
people that are
problems.
coming to it,
He outlined a program of rehabilitation near Sydney
I'm really pleased to
and
be here to
suggested
talk
to
to you
Singleton
tonight.
residents
Just
that a way
fooling
of
around with
helping
kids
drug addicts in the
If I had
community
known
would be to
then,
establish a centre which would provide emergency help and support. The message hit home when a young man fighting 8 years of addiction spoke of his
for a
experience.
couple of years I just fiddled around with tablets and smoked dope every day. That became just everyday thing to me. By the time I was 18, I knew that I had a problem with alcohol and tablets. So I entered a government
Like
drug
any other
rehabilitation centre to
community,
get
there
myself
are people
straightened
with
out.
drug problems in
Within this
Singleton.
drug rehabilitation
Those who
centre that I
attend
had my
public
first shot of
meetings
heroin
might be more
while I was in
aware
there.
of the problem now,
For the
but
next
are
couple
they
of years,
prepared to do
I just
anything
cruised
about
around
it?
from job to job.
Tonight, the Reverend Sumner has suggested various propositions, and I'm sure that Singleton will have a look at those suggestions, and if they are able to be done here, we will certainly follow them up.
Walsall's public school at Maitland is in the path of the bypass road, and while concerned parents and citizens have campaigned to save the playground, it now appears the school must accept the development and shortage of playing fields. However, there is hope that other land on either side of the school, which is to be acquired by the DNR, can be used to compensate for loss of playground space. Last night's meeting also resolved to try and obtain a way of reducing noise and air pollution which may arise from the road development. Certain assurances have been given by the Department of Main Roads.
The Divisional Engineer, Mr Bonapin, has assured us that the fencing that will go around the perimeter of the school will reduce the noise pollution.
And you're quite satisfied with that? You can see the school surviving here even with the bypass?
The school will survive. There will be difficulties associated with it though.
Until they're replaced by the F-18s, the 20-year-old Mirage fighters are still Australia's frontline defence aircraft. But since May the 4th, they've been grounded. The incidents which led to the grounding involved one aircraft from Edinburgh in South Australia, another from Williamtown on exercise in Darwin. In both cases, crews were forced to eject after cockpit indicator light showed one landing wheel was not locked into position. An intense engineering investigation was carried out by an Air Force task force in Melbourne and the outcome up was swift. This involves fitting overhauled hydraulic rams to each aircraft.
This is where the jack fits into the system. When the door opens, the wheel drops down and it's forced out by this hydraulic jack. When it's out to its full extremity, then this jack comes into operation and pushes the wheel back into its proper landing position. But none of that can happen until this operates correctly. There's a micro switch up here that shows the pilot via a green light that the wheel has locked out, and another micro switch starts the secondary jack operating. Somewhere in that system, something was wrong.
As each aircraft was fitted with the overhaul parts, it was free to fly again. This happened to be before it was 77 aircraft in the early days, depends largely on how fast pressure to have them can overhaul the hydraulic jack, which soon had about 20 On the 48-page chart has jumped to a $3 million aircraft, there is one bright spot to the whole incident. The air crews now know that the ejector seat, modified to a rocket launching system last year, does work beautifully.
Our benchmark, of course, is the preservation of the employment, and our level is the current numbers that are in the industry, and we'll be advancing our position again with the owners as that being the benchmark.
This is quite an uncharacteristic turnaround for the union movement to cancel a big strike like this at such late notice. Could not one get the idea that there's been a little bit of lack of support?
No, Ray, we believe we've held our hand as long as we can. Actually, I would say to you, especially in the Northern Districts, that's been the reverse, that we've had a constant call for meetings to be held so as the workers can be brought up to date with the current situation. And I think it will be necessary for at least a meeting to be held in the not-too-distant future to make sure we give that up-to-date report.
So, in fact, there will be a stoppage shortly, it's just not tomorrow.
There will be a stoppage in the not-too-distant future, but whether that be the form of a 48-hour stoppage or one of just a stoppage to be able to conduct report-back meetings, that'll be determined after we meet with the coal owners on Friday.
But for a high-handed government decision and then some red tape bungling, there might still be a windmill on Obelisk Hill. In fact, after it was sold and demolished in 1847, there was such a local uproar at the loss of an important landmark for sailors, the present obelisk had to be constructed. Torres May, who lives near the obelisk, has come up with the idea that a reconstructed windmill could be a valuable tourist attraction, and he's written to some 27 institutions in the hope of arousing their interest in the project. So far, however, the Hunter District Water Board, which owns the land, is the only body to show any interest.
The
Water Board, who owns this land, is quite willing to make it available. And not only that, they'll make apprentices available to work on the project. So that's the start anyway.
But of course it would require funds.
It would require funds. The amount of money that it would require, of course, would depend upon just how far the project was taken. I mean, there's the idea of a windmill itself. You might want to add facilities to that. For example, underneath you could bury in the hillside a restaurant or something, you know, and that would really bring people along. I don't know how deeply or how much money people want to spend on this kind of thing.
Well, I think in any team sport, I think the individuals have got to have faith in themselves, and that's part of my job, to instill the faith in each individual, and consequently the faith comes through to each other. They start to believe in themselves then, and I think we're at a stage now where the boys realise if we put in the effort and the work rate, we can do all right together, you know.
You have done a remarkable job picking the side up after they conceded so many goals. Do you think it can continue on now for the rest of the NSL season?
Well, as I've tried to explain them, we get our feet off the ground, get on the first rung of the ladder, and then we start to climb. But nobody's going to jump off and let you up there, and this all comes back to responsibility the players have got to accept on the park. And okay, some of the changes that's possibly been made have made a big difference to the team, but they were in limbo for that long, and I think they felt, well, where do we go from here? But I think they can feel now that there is a future for them, providing they put in the effort, and I'm prepared to put in the same time as they'll put in.
At the Department of Motor Transport in Parry Street. The drivers belonging to the Australian Railways Union complain that in the last 10 years, the road fleet has increased in size by 88%, while staff to maintain it has not increased at all. The result, they say, is dangerous trucks, which are rusted and leaking oil. The drivers hope that the Department of Motor Transport will inspect the trucks and back up their complaints. The SRA has offered the drivers 5 extra maintenance staff, but only 6 drivers are transferred elsewhere. Shop spokesman Mr. Ray Smith says considering the recent spate of fatal collisions involving trucks, this kind of cost-cutting is not good enough.
We feel the SRA hasn't made any effort to assist us to meet this problem of everyday maintenance and long-term maintenance.
So you think the SRA is unwittingly putting you in a dangerous position?
I think they're doing it wittingly. I think they're condoning it, they're getting the job done, they're doing it the cheapest way they can with the least amount of labour possible.
Eventually, the Department of Motor Transport told the drivers that they did not have the facilities to inspect the trucks, and the men then went back to the Civic garage.
A spokesman for the State Rail Authority said in Sydney this afternoon that no trucks at the Civic garage are unroadworthy and that they are repaired as required. Nevertheless, the management has agreed to meet the drivers here on Monday morning to discuss their complaints.
It was a weekend of hot shooting. The Northern Zone Championships attracted some of the best skeet shooters from around the nation, including 3 former Australian champions. The current Australian champion, Adrian Cousins from Melbourne, was also there, and it was a measure of the competition that at the end of Saturday's shooting, he was running only equal second with 4 other shooters. The current Commonwealth champion, Rolly Palmer from Coffs Harbour, could only manage equal 4th. Today, scores remain tight, with half a dozen competitors in the running for both the Newcastle and the Northern Zone titles. At lunchtime, Secretary of the Newcastle Gun Club, Mr. Paul Pritchard, said the competition was phenomenal, but even then he was willing to predict that Newcastle's Bob Wilson would take the Newcastle championship.
We've got a Newcastle shooter who once was the Australian champion. He is right up there with the leaders at the moment, and if I had a bet, I might even put my money on him.
Bob Wilson did in fact win the title in the final shoot-off. The Northern Zone Championship went to Adrian Cousins in a close finish. The 6 top point scorers will now represent the North in the state titles at Taree in August.
With only 1 or possibly 2 days of clean linen left. If the bans aren't lifted, the management is considering asking relatives to take patients home. All hospitals seem to be holding out until tonight when the HNREA State Council meets in Sydney. They hope that the union will lift some of its bans to ease the situation for patients. At this stage, many branches still intend to strike on Friday.